They wanted me to house 3 generations for free, so I bought a cabin and changed the locks. I never said I'd bought anything. I said I was browsing. It was one of those Friday dinners, the kind you attend or risk getting branded ungrateful again. Not because I'm missed, but because skipping it becomes the next family scandal. My brother Evan was already ranting at the table, spiraling about daycare fees, water damage, and his new back injury. Mom nodded like each issue warranted triage. Dad was dozing behind the green beans. I said it casually, between mouthfuls. No announcement, no weight behind it. Been looking at places a bit past the suburbs. That was it, but the mood shifted. Forks hovered. Evan's spoon smacked a bowl too hard. Even the toddlers paused their fight over a stuffed animal. Mom turned like a movie villain. Just online. I added quickly. Maybe a cabin. 2 beds. A little land. Not a big deal. Evan stared, then smiled. 2 bedrooms, like I'd mentioned a shack in the woods. Dad finally lifted his head. You sure this is the right time? What's wrong with the condo? He asked. I kept my tone neutral. Nothing. I just want my own space. Mom chuckled, a sharp, joyless sound. Well, if you're ready, we should talk. There's a place over by Evan's 5 bedrooms, yard, top schools. I blinked. Why would I need 5 bedrooms? The silence came fast and solid. Evan jumped in. Just thinking about the future. The kids would have room. You'd have room for them. I didn't reply. It wasn't new. How my silence always got translated as agreement. How Evan's mess became my problem by default. And how everyone just assumed I'd fold because I always did. Mom leaned in. Janet from the book club says it's priced to sell. We could go see it Monday. Evan nodded like a business deal was already done. Basement's finished. You wouldn't even notice us. We, not you. I looked down. Appetite gone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. Just hollow. Like something inside me had quietly reached its end. They didn't see it, but I did. That was the final Friday I'd ever sit at that table, nodding along like I didn't hear myself being erased. I didn't head home afterward. I just drove. No plan. Just left the streets I knew and took exits I hadn't in years. Watched neighborhoods thin into farmland, where barns replaced buildings and the roads lost their names. I turned the radio off somewhere around exit 12. Let the hum of the tires fill the car. I wasn't angry. That would have been clean. I was quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind you sit in when something's breaking under the surface. The last time I said no to my family, I was 15. Evan had borrowed my jacket, ripped the collar, and handed it back like nothing happened. When I asked him to fix it, he told Mom I was being petty. Mom nodded. She has more on her plate than you do. I remember looking down at that jacket, holding the torn fabric in my hands, and realizing I was outvoted in a room of 3. That never really changed. Evan got things. Time, space, excuses. When he failed, it was someone else's fault. When I succeeded, it was silent, expected. At 22, I landed my first full-time job. I called home on my lunch break. Mom answered. She asked if I'd heard Evan was expecting. We're all just so happy, she said. I said, I got the job. She said, that's great, sweetie. Got to go. Dinner's burning. At 28, I made my final student loan payment. I didn't tell anyone. It didn't seem worth the echo. Last year, when Evan's water heater burst, they called me. Not because I lived nearby. I didn't. Not because I had a background in plumbing. I don't. But because you're the responsible one. I wired $100 that afternoon. Never got a thank you. Just a text 3 days later. Can you talk to the bank for me? They're being difficult. Being difficult. Not denying the mortgage. Not refusing the 3rd extension. Just inconvenient. That was the word they used when I said I was too busy to come over on Easter. Don't be difficult, Mara. You know how much this family means to your brother. And now, apparently, I was buying him a house. I pulled over near a gas station that had long since closed. The windows were boarded up, but the ice machine out front was still there, sun-bleached and cracked. I sat in my car, watching the breeze knock over an old shopping cart. 2 beds, a little land, somewhere quiet. I wasn't joking when I said it. I wanted mornings that didn't start with a list of emergencies. I wanted coffee on a porch with no one else's shoes by the door. I wanted a life I didn't have to explain or defend. I opened my phone and created a folder. I didn't name it anything sentimental, just a blank space. Inside it, real estate listings, notes on interest rates, broker reviews, articles on septic systems, and roof warranties. I wasn't planning an escape. I was building a door. The next day, Mom sent me a link. 5 bedrooms, yard, top schools. The subject line just said, "This is the one." I stared at the message. My chest didn't hurt. It didn't rise. It just sank. Evan texted 10 minutes later. "Did Mom show you the listing? The twins are already fighting over which room they want." "Which room?" "In my house." I put the phone down, turned it face down on the counter, and went back to what I was doing quietly, calmly, like nothing had changed, but something had. I didn't respond to Evan's text. Not right away. Not the next day either. It just sat there and read, but not unseen, like a shoe left in the hallway. You keep stepping over it knowing exactly who left it and why they expect you to pick it up. By Friday, I had 2 missed calls from Mom. 1 voicemail. "Hi honey, just wondering if you got the photos. Janet says that 5-bedroom we liked is having an open house. We could go together. Don't make this difficult." I deleted the voicemail without listening again. That word always sat wrong in my stomach. They'd called me difficult when I asked to stay home from church the week after. Evan's husband walked out. When I didn't want to loan money. When I didn't want to explain myself. It didn't mean I was unreasonable. It meant I wasn't cooperating. That Sunday, I showed up to dinner like I always had, on time, holding a bottle of wine they wouldn't drink, wearing a sweater Mom once said made me look less severe. Evan was already settled in, his twins throwing stuffed animals under the table. His husband passed out in front of the game. Mom moved through the kitchen like a conductor in chaos. The same noise, the same chairs, the same place they always expected me to fill. I waited until we'd passed the salad, until Dad had mumbled grace, until the room felt full enough to hold a silence. I bought a house. No one moved. The room didn't fall silent. It fell off, like a stage light had suddenly gone out. Mom turned. "You already did?" I nodded. "Closed last week." Evan blinked. "You didn't say anything." I didn't feel the need. Dad looked up from his plate, brow drawn. "You didn't run it by anyone." I didn't answer, just folded my napkin slowly, then set it in my lap. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. She tried to smile. "We just wanted to make sure you had something suitable." Evan leaned forward, voice soft. "It's just the girls were excited." I let that hang in the air. Then I said, "They have a home. This one isn't it." No one spoke after that. I didn't need them to. They heard me. No one followed me out that night. I left the dishes half cleared, took my coat from the hook by the door, drove in silence. It wasn't dramatic, just clean. The kind of exit that didn't need slamming because the door had already been closed, just not announced. The next morning, I woke to 3 texts from Mom, 2 from Evan, all variations of the same thing. "You blindsided us. The kids are confused. You never used to be this cold." Cold? That was the word they always reached for when I stopped playing along. When I moved out at 21 instead of staying to help around the house, I was cold. When I asked to spend Christmas with friends one year, cold. When I didn't cry at Evan's wedding. Never mind that I paid for their photographer. I muted the group thread, blocked Evan for the day. It felt like setting down something heavy I'd carried long enough to forget how tired I was. That evening, Mom showed up at my apartment. She didn't call, just knocked, knuckles sharp like punctuation. I stood behind the door, heart steady. I didn't open it. She knocked again. "Mara, I just want to talk." Then quieter. "You don't get to shut us out like this." I leaned my head against the wood, took a breath. "I'm not shutting you out," I said through the door. "I'm choosing not to let you in." There was a long pause, then footsteps retreating. 10 minutes later, a text arrived from Evan's husband's number. A photo of the twins in their bunk beds side by side, holding up handmade signs. "We miss you. Aunt Mara, come visit us soon." I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered, then dropped. No reply. Another photo came 2 hours later. The baby's crib now shoved into the corner of Evan's bedroom. "He wakes up every time we move. He needs sleep, please." The guilt sat on my chest like a hand that wasn't mine. But I didn't answer. That night, I opened my laptop and emailed the real estate agent again. Confirmed closing date, utility transfer, key drop off. I clicked the folder I'd started weeks ago. The one with the blank name inside. Blueprints, budget projections, gardening plans, a list of herbs I didn't yet know how to grow. I added a new file, titled it Life Unshared. Then I shut the screen and went to bed. I didn't invite anyone to see the house. Not when I picked up the keys. Not when I walked through the empty rooms with the echo of my own footsteps. Not when I stood in the backyard and realized the silence out there wasn't heavy, just honest. There was no announcement, no social media post, no family text, but they found out anyway. Evan texted first. Mom said you closed. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't answer. 2 hours later, you said to beds, but there's a sunroom too, right? That could work for the baby's crib. Then a third. We've started packing. Just a few boxes. Mostly the kids' things. No question marks. Only expectations dressed up as facts. I stared at the messages, set the phone down, let it buzz on the counter until it died. That weekend, I came home from the grocery store to find Mom standing outside my building. Her arms were crossed, her mouth tight. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. You're being unreasonable, she said as I got out of the car. I didn't say anything. They're your family, she continued. You're not even using all that space. I unlocked the trunk, took out my groceries one bag at a time. Mara, don't ignore me. You're acting like a stranger. I turned to face her. I'm acting like someone who's finally been given a choice. She flinched, just slightly. They have nowhere to go. They had months. We thought you understood. You never asked. She looked down. Her voice wavered a little too perfectly. Evan's exhausted. The baby cries all night. The twins keep asking why you don't love them anymore. I stood still, the bag of oranges in my hand suddenly heavier than it should have been. You always said you'd be there for them, she whispered. You always said you were the steady one. I nodded. I was. So why are you doing this? I took a breath. Because for once, I'm building something that doesn't include a back door for everyone else. She didn't reply, just looked past me at the bags I was still holding, at the building I didn't invite her into. I waited, but she didn't ask to come up, and I didn't offer. When I closed the door behind me, it clicked softer than I expected. No slam, no drama, just a line finally drawn. They didn't stop. When silence didn't work, they tried volume. Not the shouting kind, the spreadable kind. Aunt Cheryl called first. I hadn't spoken to her since 2019, when she forgot my birthday and sent Evan a fruit basket for hers. Sweetie, your mom's been so worried. This whole house thing. Can't we all just talk it through like family? I didn't answer, just listened. You've always been the level-headed one, she continued. And you know your brother's been struggling. He needs you. I thanked her for calling and hung up. An hour later, a Facebook tag. Evan had posted a photo of the twins in front of stacked boxes smiling with chocolate on their faces. The caption read, "Some people say family is everything. Some people prove otherwise." Hundreds of likes. Comments filled with prayer emojis and thinly veiled attacks. Some people just lose their way. Kids shouldn't have to pay for adult decisions. We raised our children to care for each other, not close doors. I read them all once. Then I deleted the app. The next day, Mom emailed a letter, not a message. A full-page letter, PDF attached, properly formatted, signed at the bottom. She wrote that she and Dad had hoped we would share this chapter of life together, that they dreamed of the whole family growing old nearby, helping each other the way families used to. She reminded me of the mortgage I'd co-signed for them years ago, the hospital bill I'd covered when Dad's insurance fell through, the years I'd stepped up without needing to be asked. Then she asked plainly, "Why now? Why are you suddenly choosing distance over duty?" I didn't reply. I printed the letter, folded it in half, filed it under legal correspondence. That night, I watered the lavender I'd planted in the window box, made tea, opened the book I'd been meaning to start for 2 years. It was quiet, not lonely. There were no footsteps overhead, no dishes clinking in the sink I didn't leave, no bedtime tantrums behind thin walls. Only the steady tick of my own clock, a sound I hadn't heard clearly in years. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and if they kept trying to rewrite the story, that was fine. I was finally the one holding the pen. I changed my number the following Monday. No announcement, no group text, just a quiet 15 minutes at the carrier store, and a new SIM card in my phone. I gave the number to my boss, my assistant, and to friends. No one else. I updated nothing online. Left no forwarding address. When the lease on my apartment ended, I moved everything in one trip using a moving service. They'd never heard of the kind that didn't leave branded boxes behind. The cabin was smaller than my old place, older too. The floors creaked in winter. The pipes moaned when I ran hot water too long. But it was mine. Every squeak belonged to me. I painted the walls myself, built the bookshelves I used to say I never had time for. I started a garden in the back. Just herbs at first, basil, rosemary, mint, something simple, something slow. No one knew where I was. For the first time in years, I woke without checking my phone. There were no demands, no guilt, no photos of bunk beds or forwarded listings, no weaponized silence. Just the sound of birds outside the kitchen window. Sometimes I sat on the porch with my tea and read nothing, thought nothing, let the day rise and fall without rushing to meet it. This wasn't escape. I wasn't hiding. I was claiming space that had always been mine. They had taken so much without asking, so I stopped answering. And then finally they stopped asking. The email came late on a Thursday night. Subject line: "Can we talk?" It was from Mom's address, but I could hear Dad's voice in the way it was written, tight, formal, carefully weighed like a statement prepared for court. They'd decided, the email said, to sell their house. Retirement hadn't gone as planned. The market was soft. The original idea had always been for Evan's family to move it eventually. But now, with everything so uncertain, they were weighing new options. There was a pause in the message, one of those deliberate gaps, like a sigh disguised as a paragraph break. "We know we've made mistakes, but family takes care of family. Your brother and the twins need a stable place to land. Your father and I aren't as young as we used to be." I read it twice, not because I was confused, because I understood too well. They weren't asking for help. They were asking me to step back into a role I had never signed up for. I didn't reply that night, or the next. On Monday morning, I printed the email, folded it cleanly in thirds, and tucked it into a plain envelope. Inside, I placed a single card, not a letter, just contact information. A financial planner who specialized in senior downsizing and long-term housing transitions. Someone who could walk them through the next steps I no longer would. I mailed it with no return address, and when I slipped it into the slot, I didn't feel unkind. I felt finished.